Hello and welcome to the CEO Blindspots show, where leaders lead leaders. I'm your host, Birgit Kamps, and today's guest is Josh Holtz, who is the CEO and founder of Pixel-Paws Studios, which is a company that is focused on developing AI-powered pet toys that enhance the quality of their lives. Welcome to the show, Josh.
Hi, thank you.
Well, I am so glad I actually got to meet you in person. As you know, my daughter convinced me to go to a cat show on a weekend because she wanted to check out this breed called the Maine Coons, which are apparently like dogs. And there we saw you with your AI powered pet toy for cats. And we have a couple of animals, so we checked it out and we were very impressed with how you enhance the well-being, for example, of a cat through your toy. But I was also impressed when you and I were talking about what inspired this and your leadership background, because you've worked at huge companies like Dow and Lyondell, and then you've also been an IT consultant and then you're doing this.
Yeah.
Um, and I was looking at your background. I'm like, gosh, how did you figure out how to succeed as a leader? And especially, you started as a chemical engineer, then got your MBA from Rice in computer science. But you tell us, why do you think you've succeeded as a leader in so many different areas?
Well, I really appreciate that intro. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my story. I think that if we look at kind of the landscape of companies who have been tremendously successful, I'll say, like, let's say we'll look at Facebook and Apple and things like that. Those companies were built by people who were building products kind of for themselves. And in that way, it's kind of a natural product market fit. And so I really attribute what I do to being varied, like you mentioned, dabbling in many different things and trying to soak up learning and knowledge. It's amazing how much cross pollination there is in unexpected ways between experiences and industries. I started off as an IT consultant in Houston, did that for about 6 years. And then that experience really catalyzed going into the AI space and now pursuing my master's in computer science. So I really, being varied, being broad, it helps me frame problems in kind of new ways, which is where I think kind of some of the differential value that we can, basically build, through an AI powered cat toy, for instance, that kind of thing. Just looking at old problems from new ways, basically. And you can only do that by stepping outside your box and maybe looking and working in different areas that maybe, I wasn't familiar with. That's kind of been my mantra. And so that's been
Yeah.
where I go.
Yeah, I think I read one of your mantras, which is let me quote it here. Let me quote you here. Um, it's by doing anything that we become anyone. Is that what you're referring to?
That's exactly what I'm referring to. Yeah. So I actually, it's funny because it's a translation for a French saying. There's a French YouTuber who has that saying as their slogan as well. And he's kind of a prankster. And so it's almost like satire for him, but I loved watching his videos and really, yeah, that's exactly how I like to live my life. And when I would take responsibility of newcomers into organizations like Dow, I would try and help them think that way is, don't be afraid to step outside your box and try to figure out how to learn more outside your role. And I would tell them that their youth is a superpower. So don't let it go to waste.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. So, you have an extremely technical background in so many different areas. So, how did you develop yourself as a leader? Did Dow train you? School of Hard Knocks, combination?
Definitely the school of hard knocks. Yeah. So I mean, I honestly don't know how to answer that. I try to think about my mom still is a Montessori teacher. And so I went to Montessori, was educated in Montessori in my early years. And so I feel like a lot of her lessons that she would teach really translate to leadership in
Mhm.
ways that I don't expect, right? And I still think back to like my Montessori education. I'm a big believer in Montessori. My mom obviously has been
Yes.
educating in Montessori for decades. So I think that learning how to work with others in abstract ways, it helps for leadership. And I think that that's probably what I would attribute most of my leadership education plus the School of Hard Knocks for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just try to understand that everyone approaches things differently. Like basically where I find the most success is meeting people where they are. If someone works completely differently to me, but they have amazing output, I need to find out how to meet them where they are. And I can't expect them to work exactly the way that I want them to necessarily. So learning that and learning how to lead by authoring autonomy. Number one is I like to work with people who I feel I can trust with autonomy, and then learning how to meet them where they are, and trust that their autonomy is earned, and that I need to remind myself like they're going to be a different pace, they're going to do different ways, they're going to speak differently, because there's that always that urge of like, well, wish it would be this or that. So I always have to remind myself and just try to make sure to give them the space to have that autonomy and the authority to make their own decisions.
Wow. Well, what you just said is so rich. I can probably um, have this podcast go for 10 hours.
Wow,
So
thank
let
you.
me try to focus on really the where we go next, right? Because you said so many important things. Montessori education. My daughter was also raised in Montessori, and to your point, that education. First of all, it teaches you to think. It teaches you to how to work in community, how to be a leader, a follower, a middle child, if you will. And I can definitely see the translation, right, on how to be an effective leader. So, and that also the system is meant Montessori education serves the uniqueness of the individual,
Yes.
uses their interests, and then expands from there rather than the traditional system, which is we all fit in the same system.
Right.
So situational leader, right, is what a lot of leaders struggle with right now because they discover some new leadership, blanket approach that may have worked for the baby boomers, but not the Gen Xers or the Zers, or everyone's trying to find the answer on leadership, and they want the one size fits all. But you clearly have discovered that this, especially nowadays, right? It's very, you have to figure out how to lead every person. So, and again, when I was doing my background research on you, someone said, actually, someone who reported to you said you're ambitious about your contributing to others. And so I found that such an interesting statement from a direct report, right? So clearly it says a lot about your leadership style. Having said that, you also said you did learn also from the School of Hard Knocks. Can you give us a specific example maybe of when, despite knowing all these great things, you still realize, hey, what I'm doing is not working in this scenario?
Oh yeah. I've worked since I was, gosh, 15 years old. I think I was a lifeguard, or I
Mm.
think it was 15 minimum age. So I was a lifeguard, worked in retail, worked in many different facets. So I would say that I guess learning, the School of Hard Knocks, I learned where I felt like maybe I needed that autonomy and where I wasn't being met by my leader. And so that's where I kind of translate, if I feel like if leaders could meet more their people where they are, I feel like employee satisfaction goes up, which improves creativity, it improves output, improves cohesiveness of teams. So I feel like it's from learning both the positives and maybe the opportunities of different leadership structures that I've been involved with, either as an IC or as a leader in the organization. So it's really just kind of the both worlds. And if you want to, I mean, a specific example, I back up in my career. I started off as an IT consultant, directly out of, basically high school. I was 19 years old. I didn't know anything about starting a company or being a consultant or anything. All I knew was that I knew how to work with technology. And there was this whole big world of people coming into the Apple ecosystem. And there was only one consultant at the time. So I said, well, Houston's too big for that. So I went and became an Apple consultant, left Apple, and started doing that. But one of the reasons that I went and wanted to pursue independent consulting is because I really so badly wanted to work a technical role at the Apple sales store. And at the time the Genius Bar was rolling out, I wanted so badly to be a genius working on the Macs and the iPhones and things, or not the iPhones at the time, but the iPods. But it was highly coveted and very difficult to get those roles. And I felt like I was working there for maybe a year and a half, I was young. And I felt like I wasn't getting what I wanted, as fast as I wanted. So I thought, well, let me, not only is there's huge opportunity, there's only one consultant, but I'm not getting this, role in the organization. And so I just tried to do it myself, basically. So it's, school of hard knocks in that way. Like, I got yelled at by one person because I was canvassing the neighborhood trying to advertise my business. I didn't realize that, you can't just put flyers in every neighborhood. You have to follow their guidelines, and learning those kinds of things is like learning how to conduct yourself in a professional manner and run a business, ethically, responsibly, legally, all those things. It's hard,
Yeah.
especially at 20 years old or whatever, that as I progress through the consulting. But yeah, so that's definitely some school of hard knocks there.
Yeah. Well, and you said something earlier too about the importance of, like, about autonomy and all that, but you said, I like to hire people I trust. So, how did you learn to hire? And did you also discover that by making a mistake, or tell us more about your hiring process?
Yeah, an interview, you can only do so much in terms of understanding a person and their cultural fit, personality, things like that. I think what I really like to do is just when I listen to somebody, I like to ask questions that kind of give me an insight into maybe necessarily why they made the decision and not necessarily the decision they made. Because
Mm,
people approach problems from so many different perspectives. And so, from an outside perspective, a decision may look good or bad. But something I have to remind myself is that, everybody's making decisions that they feel are correct in their context. Like, nobody makes a decision thinking this is the wrong decision,
mm,
probably, right?
yeah. Yeah. Point.
Everybody's thinking this is the right one for me at this moment. So what I really like to do is just try to understand kind of their story. I have a coworker. This is an example. I have a coworker. And her husband comes from an amazing story. He has just a tremendous story, and he's looking for a new role, and he's seeking some guidance and some mentorship on different things. And I suggested that he highlight his story. They were worried that maybe they were like, oh, well, we don't want to create a sob story. And I said, well, I don't think it's a sob story at all. I honestly think it demonstrates decision making at a very high level at a young age, the ability to make long-term projections and act on them. So I think that I like to ask questions that show a long-term decision-making ability, and
Mhm.
the basically that when somebody approaches a problem, they've really thought through a lot of the different nuances and potential issues that could arise. So I try to ask questions like that. I try to find people that demonstrate the long-term thinking. One of the best ways to do that is trade school or university education, something that shows that long-term commitments can be followed through on, things like that. I mean, I still believe in the value of education, whether it's higher education or trade school or anything else, just something that shows like somebody follows through with a commitment. And obviously neither of those paths are purely fun, right? You have to do
Mhm.
things that are not very fun in both of those paths to get to the end goal of being qualified in the industry. But yeah, it's something that shows that they can really follow through and plan.
Yeah. Wow, that's okay. So you look for how they made decisions, and especially why, and
Yes,
so that gives
why?
you their context. And then it sounds like you're being able to see their commitment long term gives you a hint about your ability to trust them. Would you say
Yes.
that's true, or?
Absolutely. That's exactly, you got it. I mean, that's just how I look at bringing people on. And I mean, yeah, you just have to, yes, that's exactly how I look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then, and it sounds like you figured that out also along the way, or?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that not everybody works out in organizations. So I'll give an example. There was this one person, very brilliant person, but he ultimately didn't want to work in the organization, and he didn't like the work that he thought he was going to be assigned, essentially.
Mhm.
And he made that very known. There was an
Mhm.
opportunity potentially. There were a lot of people that really wanted him to revisit the company and reevaluate. But at the end of the day, he felt like it wasn't the correct opportunity for him. So you basically, yeah, the way that I like to do it or approach hiring and getting the right fit is listening and also presenting opportunities external too. I think that if people choose to be at your organization, you'll get way more creative and higher output from people. So I like to try and educate anybody, any newcomers, that these are the positives, these are the negatives, this is the reason why I'm here.
Yeah.
This is why we're working on this mission. Try to impart the same inspiration. I mean, I'm choosing to be in the organization the way that I'm choosing to be there, right? And
Yeah.
every job is a choice on both
Yes.
ends. And so I think that trying to impart the reasons why I'm there maybe helps to educate and helps to inspire that next generation as well. So just
Yeah.
being really transparent, leading with transparency. That's basically what I'm trying to find, the words I'm trying to find right now, but leading with transparency.
Yes, and what I like about what you said about the transparency is not just about the job, but also about the company. So if they know the company, then even though they may temporarily not like a particular job, they'll at least know the mission of the company. Like with Pixel Paws, it's to enhance the well-being of pets, right? And you said earlier a coworker in different organizations. So you're obviously love a challenge because you are not only an entrepreneur and have started this company, but you're also still working, in another company. So, speaking of time, then, how do you manage your time? Because, it's not easy to start a new company, as you know, and then also you're still contributing to another organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, oh, wow, time management is something that I've learned a lot more intimately in the past couple years. It's amazing how much time there is in a day, really, but also it's amazing how little time there is in a day, But so honestly, I'll, for better or worse, I see, people operating at a very high level, working in multiple different capacities, and I was thinking, how are they doing that? Like how are they able to do so much? And I really just think about living very intentionally.
Yeah,
With every action, I think like what's the opportunity cost of this decision for everything?
yeah,
For better or worse, it's like everything is an opportunity cost. Every decision made, right? Going
yeah. And,
to
and we're
dinner.
recording this on a Saturday, right?
Right, right, exactly. So we're recording on a Saturday, and this morning I woke up and I was like, "All right, it's a Saturday after July. It's July 5th." So,
Yeah,
yeah. So just carving out time for being equitable with my time, I think is how I approach it. Making sure that I don't necessarily because I have a partner and we live together. We're married, and making sure that I spend time with her and also spend time with the business and spend time with my continued education and spend time with my employer.
and
There's a
your own pets,
prioritization list. What was that?
and your own pets.
And my own pets. Yeah. So I everything gets a rationalization at all times. It's like
Yeah.
what right now is my top priority at
Yes.
every moment.
And Josh, here's an example of a positive blind spot that I see about you, which is I think you also know how to leverage time because you know how to leverage AI. So can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, you seem to be quite an expert on AI, and how do you view that in terms of, leadership and the quality of our lives?
I mean, how could I forget to mention this honestly? Because it's key. It's key to me being able to work on all these things at the speed that I am. I fully believe that AI is the most important invention. Gen AI is the most important invention since electricity or, fire or the wheel. I
Yeah.
think it's the biggest lever that we've ever built for the human mind. Every invention or every major invention for industrialization has been a lever for humanity, basically. How do we do more with the human form? The human form isn't really changing, right, at the
Mhm.
speed
Yeah.
that our technology is. So, how do we do more with the human form is like the key of every technology. And I think that Gen AI is the most important lever for the human mind. Steve Jobs would say that computers are like bicycles for the mind. That was one of his
Huh.
sayings because there was he built a chart, and this was he was a marketing wizard. He built a chart, and it was like a poster, and it showed the running speeds of all the different animals in the wild. And humans obviously were like middle to low. But if you put a human on a bicycle, there was almost no competition.
Yeah.
we could outbike every animal running in the wild. And it's that ability to invent and create new levers for our physiology, for our mind and our physical form. And Gen AI is the most important lever for the mind that I think we've ever invented. I think the level of entrepreneurship will skyrocket. The number of people working for themselves will skyrocket because
Yeah.
you've never been more able to do more with what you have, and taking your and tying back to earning differential experience through varied experiences. The more differential experience I feel like people have, the more capable with Gen AI they're going to be, basically. Because you can approach problems from different ways, and help shape how you approach something with Gen AI. And so learning very varied experiences. I like to say that Gen AI will flip the script a little bit. In the past, uh, the person with the most knowledge really had an advantage, and I think that the person with the right questions will be the future.
Hmm.
So how do you frame a question, and then how do you frame follow-up questions, will be determinant on how high of quality of output you're able to produce with Gen AI.
So that's how you save time is you keep learning how to ask better questions, it sounds
Yes,
like.
absolutely. Learning how, and it's just like tying back to, how to lead people. Gen AI, you have to lead it. It doesn't invent. It has no concept of context. Now, we use the word context for training it, but I think that there's probably a misconnection between real context that we experience as people and context that we impart into a model. But yeah, it's really all about meeting the AI where it is, so to speak.
Mm.
So, it's not perfect, and it
Yeah.
needs to be met where it is. And so you have to know, like, what is its boundaries? I think of AI as a calculator, right? It's a calculator with some statistical modeling, essentially, at the end of
Mm.
the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I fully, but by the same token, I fully believe in the power and the importance of human capital. It's never been more important.
Interesting because yeah, there's a lot of fear out there about, AI, AGI, all that, and a lot of leaders are resisting integrating that into their organization because security reasons and all this, well, and many other, also probably because of the learning curve they in their own mind. But when, asking, knowing how to ask the right question, almost like should help leaders feel a lot better that it's more about the right question than the data you're feeding it. But can you help leaders where how to think about AI and and the role of AI and what is real, what should we be fearful of, and what doesn't need to be approached that way?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, so the number one thing that I do, I mean, when I started Pixel-Paws Studio, I knew for sure I wanted to be AI forward. And that's one of the, also, kind of tying that in, I think that AI doesn't have to be scary, right? And so one of the tagline of the company is be playful, because,
Yeah.
it's a cat toy that uses AI. It's like, that's not very scary.
Yes.
But that's kind of my approach to it. Is But you also do have to be mindful of the security implications of using Gen AI. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, if you go to ChatGPT, if you just go to their website, the data that you put in there, and depending on the model you use, it has different privacy concerns and things like that. Models that are hosted in Europe, they might have European regulations in terms of data collection and privacy regulations. So if you go to a website, let's say you go to an AI model hosted in the United States, you live in the United States, if you don't have an explicit contract with that organization, anything that you input into the chat box is, wishy-washy on ownership.
Mm.
I'll say, so the way that I approach it is I like to understand what is going on with my data, where it's going, and who's using it, and for what purposes. Um, I have a philosophy with Pixel-Paws Studio that I won't build a product that I wouldn't want to own. I won't build something that I wouldn't trust in my house. So, being mindful of security, like the camera does not record or doesn't stream unless you really want it to. If you want it to be completely offline, you can make it completely offline. This direction of technology products where you have to create an account, you have to register, you have to put it on the internet, I think it's somewhat risky for our society in general, because I don't know who necessarily has access to all of that. So, but at the same time, if it's handled appropriately, it's not as significant of a risk. But giving people the option to opt out, I think, is really important. So, allowing people to use the product fully without having to open them up to any kind of security issues. So, having an internal use AI tool, I think, is one of the keys. So, in the prepper community, I'm not necessarily a prepper, but
What does that mean for our listeners who are not familiar with that?
yeah, so preppers are people who maybe save canned food or hard assets, things like that for, dystopian futures, right?
Yeah.
Like think of like the Cold War and things like that. Owning your AI is very important. So if you set up an organizational account on ChatGPT or on Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud
Yeah.
service, you can create an internal use only AI, and then anything you put into it is your property, and it's explicit in their terms and conditions that
Mhm.
they don't share it. It's the same thing with Google. So we personally at Pixel-Paws Studio, we use Google. So I use my the Gemini models, and because I have an organizational account, that data does not get used to train the model. It's mine to own and control, and so
Mhm.
anything that I put in there is my intellectual property. So if I don't want concerned about intellectual property, trade secrets, patents, things like that,
Yeah.
using an internal access organizational account is how I approach security. So to make sure that essentially what I'm trying to do is make sure that the IP that I generate through a Gen AI is my IP and it's not necessarily the domain of the company running the models. So
Yeah. So when you're leading a team and you're doing everything to maximize AI and own it, but what if a team member then uses ChatGPT and uploads company information? How do you lead considering that risk? Do you have a HR policy? How do you manage the people risk of that?
oh man, that's a tough one to be honest, because there's everybody has like their preference of model, right?
Yeah.
Everybody likes one model or another for whatever reason. It answers the questions the way they like, and things like that. So I get that. I think that oof, that's a really hard question. I think that education on the risk is very important. Once presented with the risks that are present, which is if you use a public access AI model, that data does not belong to you. And the use of that data is up to the company that hosts the model.
Yeah.
Once you frame it, I feel like in my experience, once I frame it that way, they think to themselves immediately, how do I avoid that? Because they want to protect their work as well. With Gen AI, people are starting to use it in ways that are more companionship too. I mean, outside of like building an industrial
Yes.
complex and, maximizing efficiency for society and all this, becoming a somewhat of a companion for some people. It's one of the highest use cases actually is companionship. So the privacy of the models will become extremely important, I think, for a lot of people. Like how does somebody interact with it and protect their emotional well-being? Because yeah, it's important. It's important to have privacy. I feel like with privacy you can have autonomy and do your best. So
Yeah.
I
So
think
it
that
sounds like
educating them that,
exactly. It sounds like the way you lead people with that is you educate them.
yes.
And what you said earlier, you tend to hire people that you can trust and you're providing a context for them, right? Which is, I guess, part of the education as well. So yeah, lots of fun twists and turns these days with AI and leadership. So but can you say something about what inspired you to start Pixel Paws?
So, yeah, what inspired me to start Pixel-Paws, going back to the Steve Jobs quote that the computer is a bicycle for the mind, I think that Gen AI will be maybe an electric bicycle for the mind. I don't want to be too grandiose about it. Maybe an electric bicycle for the mind. We'll start there. But I think that our quality of life as people is only elevated to the level at which we can buy goods from each other. So my quality of life is affected directly by the quality of a good that I can buy from you, for instance, or from any business. And if I can't buy a higher quality good, that's my maximum quality of life. That's
Huh.
just a limiting factor. And when I saw Gen AI and when I saw the applications, I was working in computer vision before I started really getting involved with large language models and Gen AI. So it was a natural fit working in
Mm.
computer vision. When I saw all of the kind of progression, it felt like um, it felt like now was the right time to be able to offer a higher quality of life with a new type of product. And the way that I frame it in my mind is when video games first came out, it was for adults. It was
Yeah.
expensive, it was for adults, and that was it. And then and that was in the, late, I think it was like the 70s with Atari and things like that.
Yeah.
So 20 years later, fast forward, I am a, young kid and my parents buy me a Super Nintendo in the 90s. So we went from adults, the price point, to kids, and then fast forward 20 years later and now pets. So my philosophy is that uh, the proliferation of technology into different aspects of life, we're now at the time where we're able to build video games for pets.
Hmm.
So AI is at a place, and technology and computing is at a place where we can, as a society, build products that used to be only for adults, and now they were for kids, and now we can even offer them to non-humans in our house. So I saw this opportunity and I thought, well, this might be a fun thing to do. It's like it's playful, right? It's like, who doesn't love watching kittens play or watching cats play? So I saw the opportunity, and I felt like I felt like it might be fun to do. And so I decided, let me just see if I can.
Yeah, and you use eco-friendly products, and probably like a lot of people these days you work a lot, so how do you exercise your cat? And that's one thing that I really liked about it, because occasionally, we travel, and a lot of the times we're working. So it's a great way to enhance the quality of the cat's life, right? By having fun and getting some exercise. So
Yeah.
I'm glad I ordered my unit from you.
Yeah, we really appreciate that for sure. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's exactly right. I mean, we can't, some people, I had one comment on one of my Instagram posts and they said, why don't you just play with your cat yourself? And I was thinking, like, I can't play with my cat as much as it wants me to.
Yes,
You
exactly.
can't be everything for everyone, right? I mean, at a
Yes.
certain, yeah. So it's that ability, like, thank you for bringing that up. That's exactly right. Cats need to be able to have their own satisfaction, and we should
Yes.
be able to provide a certain level of maybe imitation of their natural habitat where they get to hunt and play with things that behave or react to them, and I went through a PetSmart, looked at the aisle, and almost 100% of the toys are made of plastic,
Mm.
which, coming from a chemical engineering background and plastics and things like that, it's a miracle material. And I think that it's one of the most important materials ever invented, still is. But maybe for some applications, it's okay if we use recyclable cardboard. And in this case, for Pixel Paw, the only consumable is made with cardboard. So when the cat shreds it up, you only have cardboard in your house, or it's only ingesting
Yes.
cardboard, right? And
Yes.
so with other cat toys, you have other risks potentially of different kind of material being, introduced to your house, and wherever it's sourced from, how can you be sure that, something that I think about a lot, maybe it's not necessarily a huge risk, but lead in the environment, that was something that was more pervasive in previous years, but there's still lead being used in different products, and there are people that sell lead testing kits. And something I always wonder when I look at something that's shiny at the store is there lead in there?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's basically the philosophy. When I looked at this stuff and I thought, why do we need necessarily something that is made with something other than cardboard for the cat to shred?
Yes. Well, and again, situational awareness of what cats need and want, but you also customized it, right? So your AI powered toy, knows the how the cat moves and what interests the cat, what bores the cat, and so, um, yeah, just brilliant what you put together. So I'll put
Thank
this in
you.
the description, but if people want to know more about it, they can go to Pixel-Paws.ai. So then, kind of my parting question to you is, you've had a lot of experiences, big companies, small companies, everything in between, chemical engineer, AI, all that stuff. So what tip do you have for example, a new leader who, may be facing a crisis for
Mm.
the first time that they've not faced before? And or is there a crisis you faced that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that question. I think that I mean, to some extent, Gen AI is
That is the crisis right now.
exactly. That's exactly where I was going to go. With Gen
Yeah.
AI, if you look at some of the articles and the headlines and things that get clicks, the things that get attention, it can feel like a crisis. It can feel like a crisis of society and a crisis. It's like an existential dread, like, are computers going to come replace everybody? Humans will have no value and our ideas won't have value. And, I think that I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I fully believe in human capital. I think that there's something magical about the human mind that AI has not captured. That's
Uh-huh.
my philosophical belief. And I'm not sure when that would be, if it will be captured or replicated. But I feel like right now, Gen AI is a tool that can be leveraged by the creative minds of people.
Mm.
So that's just the way I like to approach it. And I think that a lot of the media and clicks, and well, it's all attention driven. Actually, one of the inspirations for Pixel Paws was can we use attention with cat toys, right? With AI and things like that. Can
Yeah.
I use the algorithms that are used in social media for cat toys?
Except for you do it for the good.
Well, that's where I was going is I think that there's so much opportunity for the good out there and there's so much opportunity to leverage AI in positive ways. And I think that as we discover those avenues, it will become clear that this is not a society ending technology and people still have tremendous value to each other and to themselves. Before the invention of electricity, there were whale oil lamps all over cities in the world,
Mm. Mhm.
and they burned whale oil to light the cities at night. And at the invention of electricity, I'm sure it felt pretty existential. Like, oh, how are we going to keep all these different societal pieces working the way they have been? But humans never lost their importance through any invention in history. And I don't believe that Gen AI will be any different. I think that it's going to be the most important lever that we ever build, and it will be hugely impactful. But at the end of the day, I think that we have something pretty unique in
Yeah.
our minds.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate knowing your context there. It makes a lot of sense. So if I'm an entrepreneur or a leader in a company where I get to make decisions, what recommendation would you have if I've never really been educated in AI or AGI?
Yeah. Funny enough, LinkedIn has kind of turned into an educational resource somehow. It was like
Mhm.
a social media for professionals and YouTube as well.
Yes.
I heard this phrase. It was hilarious recently. They called it YouTube University because and the algorithms they'll kind of provide to you more content that you've engaged with in the past. So if you start researching AI in general, the algorithms will start kind of feeding you that content, right? So you'll
Yeah.
start reading that content, you'll start seeing that content. Same on YouTube. If you start researching some AI topics, there's some fantastic channels out there that are at an appropriate level where you don't need a PhD to understand what they're saying and they're digestible and things like that. So there's educational content on YouTube. There are influential leaders. There's one that I really respect at Meta. His name is Yan LeCun, I believe is the pronunciation. I think he's French. Yann space LeCun. I don't know if it's two N's, but
Yeah.
he invented the architecture at a fundamental level of what we use today for Gen AI. Back
Mm.
in the 90s at university, he has a PhD in computer science, and he's a very I'm inspired by him because he's also has shares the same view that humans do have a special insight still, and Gen AI is not necessarily going to jump and replace us. So
Yeah.
my I think my suggestion is follow follow people maybe who have a an outlook that you want to impart on yourself as well.
Yeah.
So like Yan LeCun, people like him. Maybe it's easy to get maybe into the I'll call it the doom loop where it's you follow accounts that are a little bit scarier or something like that, and then that's kind of more of what you get. So trying to break that cycle It's
Hmm.
very challenging, but like, follow accounts that are educational, but also at an appropriate level for, a leader, an executive. So that's my advice for sure.
Great, because clearly as leaders, we need to be lifelong learners. So learn that too. And I like also what you said earlier about the power of the question, right? So for me, I'm also not an AI expert background, but I learned to, for example, ask AI to educate me as if I'm a 10-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
like what what this means or what that means, or what's the first step I should take as a leader given my current situation, right? I'm also a board member of a cybersecurity company, and I didn't understand half of the technical terms they were using, and I was able to ask questions in a way that I could understand, right? And I could adjust the question. But yeah, you're right. It's YouTube. I mean, we could. There's so much information out there. And, I appreciate you giving the tip of someone that you follow, because to your point, once you start going down that road, it's easy to fall into the doom loop or to get distracted by things that don't help you get to where you want to be. So being clear about where you want to go is obviously important. So thank you for being willing to go here today and contribute to other leaders. I myself have learned a lot too from you, Josh. And again, really, I can see your commitment to the bigger picture and your mission. And thank you again for doing everything you need to do to figure out how to manage your time and be here today.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks again for the opportunity. I appreciate it. And yeah, this was an amazing talk. I really appreciate the opportunity to share our insights.